it's a numbers game, especially with the micro space. I've been doing this for over 10 years and I still can't tell you which piece of content's going to take off. Like I say that all
Right.
the time. It's shocking, like which one takes off versus which one doesn't. So at the end of the day, you need enough hooks in the water. And so that's why I think the scale, especially with micros, is so important. And going back to like why I started Statuspheres, I saw these big brands with big budgets, and the reason they didn't work with micros is because they have to deploy a large budget, so they need to have a lot of
Right.
hooks in the water, and there just wasn't a way for them to do that. And now we can. Now I think that one of your other questions that made me think of a different topic as well that I think is important is like the brand safety piece too, because like brands also that's the other thing that scares them about working with so many is they built this amazing brand that they want to like harness and they want to like approve every single word and every single shot. And it's like if you're scaling to 1,000 people posting, you can't do that. You have to let go some of those creative reins, and
Mhm.
let the creators be their authentic selves. Now you don't have to repost all the content on your feed. I get it. Like the brand marketing is important, but I think letting them all do tell their own story and be themselves is the magic of influencer marketing.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Lee with the E-Marketing Association. I wear a bunch of other hats, running Did It and running my own brand, Truth Nutrition, and a couple of nonprofits. So one common factor of all of those is marketing. And one super important thing these days when it comes to marketing is understanding the power of influencers and creators. So I'm super excited to be chatting today with Kristen Wiley, who founded Statusphere. So we'll start with the origin story, Kristen. What was the origin story? What was the catalyst for you to decide, there are a bunch of platforms out there, but they're not meeting the needs. I'm going to have to do this myself.
Yeah, it's a fun story, and thanks for having me on the podcast, Kevin. So the origin story of Statusphere. So I have been in the influencer marketing space for my entire career. So I started, and when I say my entire career, it's actually probably even pre-career. So when I was in college, I actually had a professor say, "Start a blog. You'll learn more doing that than you will doing anything in school. So you should start with that." So I started the blog, and I just a passion project, fun side project, and it grew to the point where I was getting a meaningful amount of traffic, and I started getting brands reaching out to me to do collaborations. So this was the first foray into influencer marketing. This is back in like the 2010. So this is like before Instagram, before TikTok, before anything. Fast forward to when I graduated, my first job out of college. I got a job offer at a PR agency to run and help with their blogger network, which that was also my first time on the brand side. So very early in my career, I had a perspective on being on a lot of these influencer networks, which at the time were very blog focused and YouTube focused, being as both a creator and a brand. And then for the next 5, 6 years, I worked at different agencies helping run their influencer programs. And I found that we were seeing really great results with these micro nano influencers, but there were no platforms that really helped you scale it. So the brands were seeing ROI, but they were coming to us and saying like, I don't want just like 10, 20, 50 creators. I want thousands, right, of creators posting. And I felt like there wasn't a solution for that. So I went out and created Statusphere with our amazing team. We built a technology platform that helps brands scale micro influencers. We're the only platform that can get over 1,000 creators posting with less than an hour of setup time. So that's really the niche that we serve.
Great. That's an awesome backstory. And you mentioned the term micro influencers and nano influencers, and obviously then there's sort of mid influencers all the way up to the Kardashians and folks of that scale. Um, so, there's not everyone has the same definitions of where the breakpoints are as far as follower count or levels of engagement, et cetera. But how do you think brands and agencies should think about that ecosystem as far as how their definitions are? Does it even matter how they define it? And is it really more about, how to herd all the cats into the same direction, and use your platform or other platforms to do that?
Yeah, the term micro and macro influencer has evolved over the last many years. It's interesting when I started the company, micro influencers like follower count was the main predictor of whether you were a micro or a macro influencer. And I remember brands being like, I don't want to work with anyone less than 100,000 followers. And then they'd go down to like 75,000 and then 50,000. And I would tell them, I'd be like, if just try the micros and then I will give you your money back if the ROI is not more. And over again, brands started realizing that. And that shift has really happened, I think, on a massive scale lately. So now brands you've probably heard will be like, oh, I want micros even more than macros because they feel like
Right.
they're the ROI is there and they're seeing that. That said, there is a space for the macros too. Like they definitely can influence buying decisions as well. I think it's just trying to figure out the ROI because they typically cost a lot more.
Sure.
But when it comes to like defining what a micro influencer is, we always say that we believe anyone who can influence a buying decision is an influencer, and our platform is trying to help enable those, match those people with the right brands, and make it a win-win experience. So we look at a bunch of different factors. One of the main ones being engagement rate and reach. We actually look at over follower count because now with platforms like TikTok and Instagram, you can have 1,000 followers but reach 10,000, a million people. So follower count really is not the metric anymore. It's more engagement rate and like impressions.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's interesting because one of our subject matter expertise is, but a smaller piece of its business is sort of the influencer side of things. But we had a client that was curious as to whether or not across their uh, hundreds of thousands of customers, did they have any micro influencers in there, right? So we actually built a platform that tapped into a database called Full Contact, and we API'd into it and discovered not only were there a bunch of really great micro influencers in there, but there were a few mid and macro influencers, which is of course really crazy to us because when we reported that data back to that client, they actually had like all the information, including phone numbers and shipping addresses, because they had bought product from this company. So, it's sort of fascinating. How do you, when you're working with sort of the micro influencers, if you're lucky enough to have them as customers, obviously the sale process is a little bit different because you don't have to convince them about the brand or do the educational process. But when you are doing that educational process and you want the authenticity, how do you recommend folks, work with that to sort of assure that the authenticity is there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The question is like, how do you, it's great they're buying it, but how do you activate them to tell their friends? And one of the terms like we use internally is C2C marketing. And I truly believe that's like the next era of marketing or consumer to consumer, right? Like it's building this entire community powered commerce channel. And I think that brands are starting to realize that that's where things are heading. And I think what you did with that company is exactly that. It's right. It's sourcing your community and actually making them a channel. It's word of mouth marketing, the like most holy grail of marketing. It's just now that we're online, I believe that we all like we can actually make it a productive channel that we can track and scale. So that's where I think that the future is heading when it comes to that. But I think it's amazing to look at your audience and see, you probably already have a bunch of, well, you definitely have, I should say, a bunch of micro influencers in your own already consumer base that you've built.
So I'd love to go into some of the criteria that you had mentioned are important, right? And you had mentioned engagement rate as one of them. And, obviously, different creators, different influencers will have different size audiences. And so they bring two things to the party, or more than two things, but two of the major things they bring is, their own creativity and their ability to tell the story in a wonderful way and their own audience. So, how should brands and the agencies that are helping manage influencers balance those things? Because you might have one creator that's actually awesome at creating, but they don't bring a whole lot of their own audience. It's going to be up to the brand to boost that creative. And then you may have another creator that's like, pretty good at the creative, but they just have an amazing, highly engaged audience. So, balancing that as they're sort of rolling out their influencer programs, any best practices there?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So when I had run influencer campaigns in the past, and even when I was a blogger as well, many brands will take the content and then run additional paid at the content because it converts better. And there's a myriad of studies. Meta has come out with a ton of them saying that you can increase your ROAS 3 to 5x by actually using user generated content versus studio produced content or brand produced content. The same is true on TikTok. There's a concept of spark ads where you actually run the ads through the creator's handle. So if I was promoting a product, instead of you seeing the brand name at the bottom, it would have my name or my TikTok handle. But when you click the ad, it goes to the actual brand's page. And so that's called allow listing. And they have it on both TikTok, Instagram. They even Pinterest rolled it out. And that's one of the best ways to maximize the ROI. And I think the wrong question isn't like which one, like should we work with creators and then boost them, or should we just find creators with the right audience already? I think you should always be doing both to maximize your ROI, because if you're getting the piece of content, I think that's one of the biggest ways that brands miss out on ROI is by not using the content across their paid ads, across, their even in your email newsletters. There's a bunch of stats that show like you have a higher click-through rate if you put UGC in your newsletters. If you put it on your website, people stay on your website longer. So like there's a bunch of ways that you can really maximize the investment in working with influencers. And so I always say like you should be looking at as one big channel and one big picture versus just like siloing how you're using that content.
Yeah, I'd love to drill into that a little bit more from the perspective of, some people think about influencers as sort of the ultimate meritocracy, where the sort of cream rises to the top, right? Which sounds a little bit like movie producers or A&R teams at record labels, right? Which is they're placing a bunch of bets all over the place. They know not everyone's going to be a winner, but they're really hoping that, you've got a bunch of really good winners and then a few that break even. And then you've got your other ones, which it's all right. We gave it their best shot and they didn't work out as well as we had hoped. Is that the right way to think about influencers as well?
Yeah, that's a really, I think, great way of looking at it. It's a numbers game, especially with the micro space. I've been doing this for over 10 years and I still can't tell you which piece of content's going to take off. Like I say that all
Right.
the time. It's shocking, like which one takes off versus which one doesn't. So at the end of the day, you need enough hooks in the water. And so that's why I think the scale, especially with micros, is so important. And going back to like why I started Statusphere is I saw these big brands with big budgets, and the reason they didn't work with micros is because they have to deploy a large budget, so they need to have a lot
Right.
of hooks in the water, and there just wasn't a way for them to do that. And now we can. Now I think that one of your other questions that made me think of a different topic as well that I think is important is like the brand safety piece too, because like brands also that's the other thing that scares them about working with so many is they built this amazing brand that they want to like harness, and they want to like approve every single word and every single shot. And it's like if you're scaling to 1,000 people posting, you can't do that. You have to let go some of those creative reins, and let the creators be their authentic selves. Now you don't have to repost all the content on your feed. I get it. Like the brand marketing is important, but I think letting them all tell their own story and be themselves is the magic of influencer marketing. So it's important to have that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. When it comes to, engaging with either the existing customers, right? Because we talked about existing customers might end up being a lower friction way of starting, but you want to tap into a broader set of micro influencers. Does that change the way you would potentially compensate that micro influencer differently if they were an existing customer versus new to the brand? And how should they think about the compensation models? Is it sort of a one size
Mhm.
fits all compensation model to roll out to a thousand influencers at once?
Yeah, that's also another good question. I think what's been a limiting factor in the past. I'm a big fan of the free market model and trying to find where the sweet spot is. I have both friends and seeing it myself, what I used to charge brands, and like it can really vary based on what I call the value exchange that's happening. If there's a creator who it's a brand that they absolutely love, they will use this product. They are like a huge fan, and you have so much brand equity. You may not need to pay them as much. Now, at the end of the day, it's their choice if they want to opt in, and you'll find out what your sweet spot is for payment. But I do think brands have to be a little bit careful where there is some negativity online. If you are asking two creators to do the exact same thing and you pay one significantly more, like they do talk to each other. So I'm a big fan of doing like one rate if everyone's doing the same like output, and letting the creators decide if they want to opt in or not. So that way it puts it in their hands. So on our platform, for example, we have what we call the claim rate. And so a brand will put out an offer, and if their claim rate is low, we'll tell them like you need to probably up your how much you're creator incentive is. Like you either need to give more product, you need to give more money, you need to give more of something because your ask is too big and creators aren't excited about it, right? So I'm a big fan of the free market approach, but I will say if a brand comes to me and asks like, yeah, what's the norm for payment? There isn't really a norm because it has so much to do with if it's in a great fit for the creator and the brand, and each creator has to decide that for themselves.
Sure. Yeah. You mentioned earlier where it is a best practice for brands to amplify the winning creative, right? If creative is showing promise and, you're going to actually, put some of the brand's budget behind that, does that end up, being a big factor for the influencer? Like if they're medium size or small and they know that the brand it has the potential of at least putting some pretty serious ad budget behind something, and of course the creator goes along for the ride there. Does that end up being part of getting a better claim rate? The fact that the influencers know that, okay, if I end up creating something great, more people will see it.
Yeah, I definitely think that is part of the value, but it also goes like, what does the creator value, right? If the creator
Right.
values getting their content out to a bunch of people, then they might say like, I'll throw in your right to you boost my content all day long. And it's funny, we actually let the creators set their rate for for the boosting piece. So the creators
I
all
see.
get the same rate for the actual collaboration based on if they
Mhm.
opt in to what the free market they decide is. Then they put their rate for boosting, and we see a variety. We have some creators that want to set zero. We've seen them say, I actually would love to just set $0. We're like, hey, you
Right.
should you should charge for that because you're getting value. So we try to educate our creators too, because I think that's important. But at the same time, I get it. When I had my blog, I remember I was working with like Coca-Cola and they boosted it and it got me so many more followers on my account that I was thrilled that they sent more traffic to my
Sure.
page, right? So I think it really depends. It just goes back to I like giving the creator the choice, and I think that that's the best way to create a win-win environment for both the brand and the creator.
Yeah, let's dig a little deeper into the content repurposing, because one thing I've noticed, the SEO practice that did it, for example, has now evolved into answer engine optimization or generative engine optimization, or
Yep.
whatever you'd like to call it. And part of that is just this very similar descriptions of a brand or product being everywhere that's crawlable, right? Everywhere that an LLM can find that data and ingest it. And it becomes a sort of a different form of the votes that used to be page rank generating in Google, right, are now essentially votes because a lot of folks are talking about a brand. And whether that's branded content or non-branded content, it seems like ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini are ingesting it nonetheless. So the repurposing of content now seems to check off a lot of check boxes, right? It doesn't just check off influencer marketing and social media marketing and creating ad assets, but also potentially even improved visibility in the future in like a Chat GPT, Claude, or Gemini. So as you talk about this repurposing, do the brands and marketers understand that multifaceted value to the repurposing and thinking about where are all the places this content should live, right? It shouldn't just live on our blog and on our social media handles and on the influencer social media handles, but maybe other places too. Like, how should they think about that? Like getting the most mileage out of that content.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of my favorite topics. I post about it actually on LinkedIn a lot because I think it's one of the reasons why people are always like, how do we track the ROI of influencer content? I'm going to be frank, like that's the holy grail. I would love to be able to track every sale that goes to influencer. I'd love to be able, I mean, attribution as a whole for marketers is a challenge, right?
Sure.
But the same marketers that are a lot of times saying I'm not seeing the ROI also aren't using the content to its full potential. And so I'm like, just the content alone probably provides you ROI, and then any sales are gravy at that point. And a lot of our brands view it that way. They're like, just getting content, a consistent content funnel that we can use for ads is already the ROI we see. Then they're like, we're also are seeing sales lift on top of that. That's amazing and that's incredible. But like they kind of pick one piece. But I think that the more that you can use it across your funnel, it really just like it's like pouring, gas on a fire of like in a good way of like getting you more conversions. So I do get on my soapbox a lot and be like, please use it across them. Now, one of the challenges large brands have, I think, is that their departments are so siloed, it's challenging to use that content. So
Uh,
I also like speak with a lot of large brands to be like, how can we break down those silos? How can we get the ads team to log in because the influencer team's already using this, and then you have like your affiliate team, and then you have, your newsletter team, you have your email marketing team. Like all of those should be accessing the content. And I think the future of marketing teams as well has way less silos too, if you really want to maximize your ROI of what your marketing team is doing. So the brands that are doing best are the ones that really see it as a holistic, like they all work together.
Yeah, so obviously breaking down those internal silos is part of that. What are some other ways that platforms like yours and other just ways of managing everything simplify the process, right? Because, you know, um, the brands can't always necessarily afford either an agency overhead or an internal full-time employee or even a part-time person to simplify this. So, how do you streamline this? How do you streamline it and know all your folks are going in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very exciting time for marketing, but it's also very challenging for marketers because it's changing so quickly. So you probably know this better than anybody, but I I think the brands I'm seeing excelling do have a strong leader on their marketing team that wants to break down silos. The larger companies that we work with, I mean, larger companies in general can have sometimes, are more prone to silos and sometimes even some politics within it. And the more you can break that down and realize they're all on one team with one goal, the better. I think the biggest danger is if you break down like your TikTok shop team is over here, and then your social team is over here, and your affiliate team's over, and they never talk to each other.
Right.
I see that, unfortunately, it's all too common how often I see it. And now at big brands, those are all massive teams, but at a small brand, they might even just have one person, or they have an agency who only does one thing and they don't talk. So I think one of the ways to solve it is by starting at the top and finding a marketer that really can bring all the pieces together, and is kind of the orchestrating between them, and breaking down those walls, if they can get the budget to have at least that one person.
So for brands that have maybe dabbled with influencer marketing but haven't really, gone full force into it, but they realize that, after watching or listening to this podcast, like, okay, now's the time. I really need to get my ducks in a row and launch something. What are the sort of steps that they need to go through in order to launch an effective micro and nano influencer program?
Yeah, I love that question, because I think all too often people are like, let's just like try it a little bit. And they'll do like 10 creators, 20, maybe 50 posting. That's realistically, as with any ad channel, you can't just do a teeny bit. Like that's your learning phase. You got to expect to get no ROI from that. Learn and then iterate, learn and then iterate. I always tell brands, I have small brands come to us a lot and they'll ask, can I work with you to scale? And I'm like, if you haven't figured out your strategy, like we scale whatever your current strategy is when you use our platform. If you don't have a strategy, I would recommend you testing and getting that first, seeing what works for you, and then using a platform like ours to actually scale it up. So if you're just getting started, my first recommendation would be like, make this a core part of your strategy for at least 6 months, really a year, and of testing and saying like, we're going to make this a core strategy. Then after, 6 months at least, and you start seeing what's working, then you would want to hire a platform to really help scale it from there as well. That's what I would recommend if you're starting at like square one.
Are there some other best practices that are sort of specific to the micro influencers and the nano influencers and don't necessarily hold true with the big ones?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I was going to bring this up when you mentioned SEO because not only is it true with, all of the ChatGPT and all of the AI search, but you also have social SEO, which I think is really, really interesting, when it comes to micros. So social SEO is the concept of 73% of Gen Z search on TikTok and Instagram instead of Google. So when someone says like best restaurant to eat in New York, they're going to TikTok. When they say best moisturizer for dry skin, they're going to TikTok. I know I am not Gen Z, I'm millennial, but I do the same thing. And it's a very incredible search experience to see like 50 people and scroll through them and find somebody who has your same complexion and like see what she says about the product. I feel like I move through the funnel so much faster and more confidently when I do that. And we're seeing that across different brands. Now, the only way to rank on social search is to get a significant amount of people posting and using the right keywords. So we have done this with many brands are leveraging our platform for this, where they get, hundreds of people using a specific keyword, key phrase, and we actually get that product ranking for it in the TikTok search or the Instagram search. And I think that that's one of the examples of like macro is different. Like when you search for example, like best blush from Rare Beauty, the owner of Rare Beauty or the face of it is Selena Gomez, who has the most followers like in the world on social platforms. She doesn't come up in the search at all. It's all just people with only a few thousand followers coming up. And so I think that brands are starting to realize that if they do want to be part of the conversation and part of that buyer's journey, they do need to work with micros and in a very strategic way.
Yeah, what I really love about that is that strategy is very similar to what within SEO used to be called barnacle SEO, which is even if I rank my own domain, that means there's 9 or 19 other links, right, that are out there that could potentially say nice things about me, right? And so digital PR evolved to sort of fill those additional slots with as many nice things that could be said about the brand as possible. And so I love it from that perspective, but I also love it from the perspective of if you were to consider YouTube a search engine, it would be the second largest,
Yep.
right? And it may be, in its rearview mirror, it may see TikTok catching up, right? Because people are heavily searching on TikTok at the moment, particularly within certain demographics. So that's two reasons I really love that sort of syndicate everywhere and syndicate heavily perspective because it helps from so many different angles, and it future proofs your visibility potentially in ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini to the extent that those are able to crawl the TikToks, Instas, and YouTubes of the world. I mean, Google has, I believe, turned off the ability for ChatGPT to crawl YouTube transcripts. So you'll need to make sure if you've got YouTube, for example, shorts and videos there, that you post those transcripts somewhere else if you're doing a
Hmm.
podcast or something else. So it's amazing how holistic digital marketing has become as a result of all these factors working in tandem. Um, is there anything else we should be thinking about from doing influencer marketing in 2025 and beyond that we didn't discuss?
Yeah, I think we covered most of it. I think in the term even influencer, I think something that is interesting is you'll notice the influencers themselves don't like to be called influencers. The term they've more adopted is more creators, and
Sure.
I think just the term influencer, but brands still use it. So we obviously still use the term influencer marketing because they do. But I think it's just helpful to also like keep a pulse on the what is now called like more the creator community, and really like understanding the culture that's happening over there within in terms of your product. So I always tell brands like, have you ever TikTok searched your product? What are people saying about it? And it's amazing how many brands don't start there before they run an influencer campaign. And I think it's always important to almost like crowdsource or see what people are saying even before so that you can make sure to
Sure.
jump on trends that are happening, and you can do so much more with it if you can keep a pulse on that. So that would be one of my other recommendations. And then lastly with like virality optimization, which is always a hot term, is like how do we go viral? I think this goes back to like it's a numbers game, and if you have consistent good content and you are doing like brands use our platform to A/B test like messaging and actually see which one has a higher hit rate. We call the hit rate of like out of this many posts, this many go viral, or this many kind of like are outsized returns for it. And there is, although you can't make anything go viral, you can create a strategies that helps foster it. And I think that more people need to talk about having data-driven influencer marketing versus just like throwing stuff at a wall constantly and actually like analyzing the data behind it.
Yeah, that's great advice, and it goes back to the sort of movie studio slash record label perspective of and you need to be strategic in picking your bands and picking your movies that you fund as opposed to just completely random. But because if we're going to start thinking about the influencers more as creators, the way they like to be thought about, it brings up an interesting follow-up question, which is there's sort of a fascinating bifurcation in opinions, particularly around AI use in creative, right? And whether or not that makes you a legit creator, right? If you do a faceless YouTube channel and it's doing really well, and you're using 11 Labs and potentially
Mhm.
using VO3, and you're not the person behind it, but clearly the creative was still being somewhat guided, right, by a creator. Are you a legit creator, or are you just the creator of this AI slop that other people just have a huge negative vibe around? because you start seeing stuff go viral that is clearly AI, right? I mean, this
Hmm.
last, I think, week, it was the bunnies on a trampoline, right?
Yeah.
Which was totally AI, but highly entertaining, completely mind-numbing, no, not useful, and it had no socially redeeming value at all. But you sort of were glued to it because you're like, oh, that's sort of cute. It's like you wish it was real because it's so funny, right? And so, how should that fit, in your opinion, into this jigsaw puzzle, right?
Hmm.
Should you go 100% human creator? Should you consider AI facilitated creativity as a brand?
Yeah, yeah, it's a hot topic. So I feel like overall AI is going to make us all more efficient. I'm in the optimistic camp, and we've already seen it across our team, and even our platform uses AI to analyze the data and give you ideas for your briefs that help it perform better. But when it comes to actual the content, I think it's also there's an I've heard an analogy people give, which is when Photoshop came out, people are like, "Are you really an artist? Because you're using Photoshop, right?" Like you're but now we would never say that, right? Because we know
Right.
how much of a talent it is. I think that AI is, it's a machine. So but the part that's really going to make it special is the human interaction and piece. It's just going to make people more efficient. Like somebody could have programmed a video with bunnies jumping. It just would have taken like way longer for them to do. Someone still came up
Right.
with a prompt of like bunnies jumping on a trampoline, right? Now, when it comes to brands, though, I do think they have to be careful about how they use AI. For example, if you're a skincare company and all of a sudden you have fake people talking about your products, like, or AI generated, I should say, people talking about your product. I mean, that feels like false advertising. Like,
Yeah.
hey, someone without skin is advertising a product for skin. Like, that seems just wrong, right? So,
Yeah.
I think this is where we're going to have a big conversation. And when I say a conversation, it's going to be between brands and consumers about where the line is and what makes sense. Obviously, I'm very bullish on the human aspect of it. And I think that actually it's going to become like a commodity just to create AI generated UGC, but to get real people posting that have real opinions that have real trust factor is going to become more and more valuable, and that's why I think building these communities like are going to be so important for brands of the future. So I think there's still a space for both and there's value, but I think you really should make sure also to keep tuned into your audience and also like your product. If you're using AI to just edit something in the background that was like annoying, like a street sign out of a phone, like no one's going to really care about that, right? Like it's that. But if you're actually editing someone's complexion to make it look better, we all had issues with that with Photoshop. People are going to have the same issues with AI, in my opinion. So,
Yeah, I think some people had issues with that, even with the ads that made their way into Vogue year after year, right? And
yeah,
you
which
know, within fashion, within cosmetics, but within other categories as well. So that brings me to my last question, which is really, people probably associate creator-driven marketing to specific industry categories, cosmetics and beauty, maybe fitness. But are there any examples either from within your own portfolio of clients, but also just situations where you're like, wow, that's a really interesting use of micro influencers. Maybe it's within B2B or a category that people wouldn't ordinarily think can be influencer or creator driven.
yeah, I believe there's influencers in every category. Any category with people in it has an influencer in it. One of my favorite examples is actually I have a friend that runs a like plumbing company. It's like a device that plumbers use. There is a huge plumbing influencer community, like huge on YouTube and on TikTok. There's a truck driver, huge truck driver niches on TikTok that like if you're going after truck drivers and you can get into that TikTok, like you'll sell out. So there it's like the beauty of all these social platforms is these wonderful communities of niches mean that there are creators. Now, would you be able to find 1,000 creators in every category? No, but there are definitely influencers in every category. B2B, same thing. LinkedIn has become a very massive, example of that. And I think we're seeing at the end of the day, though, you don't want to dilute like some creators that go and start kind of sell out. They stop being trusted, and then of course it's a balance. So that's why I think like if you're on the creator side, authenticity is so important. Like speaking your mind. For example, we always tell our creators if they don't like the product, they don't have to post, and they can fill out feedback in lieu of posting. I think that's so important because the minute that creators start supporting brands and products they don't believe in is when this stops working. So I think that it's just very important also to make sure that the authenticity stays there. But to answer your question, there are niches everywhere. So
So yeah, I have a selfish question as I no, I lied. I said the last question was going to be the last one, but I thought of one that occurred to me, which is, under Truth Nutrition, as we do our relaunch, we got a bunch of new products hitting. I bought the company a few years ago, but I'm sort of pivoting it. One of the challenges we faced as we thought about influencer marketing is, our product sizes are sort of big enough where it's like, wow, it gets pretty expensive, right? So I mean, if you're talking about, you know, products of this size, right?
yeah.
To send these out to influencers it's going to be pretty expensive, especially if they're micro or nano
Mhm.
influencers. If you're going to make influencers and creators a big part of your marketing plan, should you actually go into production with sort of a separate sample size run and make also potentially those same sample sizes available on your website at a low
Mhm.
price point as well, right? And how should a person think through that strategy?
Yeah, I do think that's one strategy. I will say creators normally are getting full size products or used to getting full size products. And I think that that really, first of all, it actually gives you better content to repurpose in your ads. So this is
Right.
also an
Great point.
interesting thing
Great
to
point.
think about because I've come across almost every scenario, so I can speak to it. But yeah, so sampling I view as a very different kind of angle than UGC creator content, which is normally recommended to do full size product. I mean, we work with hair dryers that are $400 they're shipping to creators, right? But when you think about the piece of content they got that they could use across their channels, it ends up working out. Not to mention with a product like nutrition supplements, we work with a lot of those as well. Although the product is expensive value, which is great because the creators are also more excited. So maybe you have less compensation on the back end if they see that value. But then also those creators, if they like your product, they could become customers themselves. We see that all the time with these
Sure.
micro influencers as well. So I think though the key is like really nailing that product and seeing the LTV be big enough because hopefully too you're not just sending them that product. Like each customer you're getting is buying more than one, especially with a
Sure.
consumable versus like even a hair dryer, right? So I think really nailing that LTV and your overall like product market fit also before you jump to creators is also key. The last thing I would say is thinking about your hero product. Most brands have a core product that hooks people in and then they expand them across the portfolio. I always recommend that like with I always recommend this if you're just starting out is starting with your hero product with your creators versus I can't tell you how many times a brand comes to us and they're like, this is our problem product. Like, let's have creators promote it. I'm like, if it's your problem SKU, there's probably a problem that creators aren't going to solve. Like, it's probably not just brand awareness. Maybe it's the formula. Maybe it's like, so I think really nailing it because that's when you really maximize the ROI because then these creators tell people way more than you're even seeing online, right? Like, I know when I was a blogger, there's brands that I loved so much. I still tell people about them like 8, 10 years later. So like I think you nailing the product is number one, but I would recommend the full size.
Yeah, that's an awesome point. Because no amount of advertising or no amount of influencer marketing or creator marketing will fix a bad product. So you need
Correct,
to be able to
correct.
deliver on that promise.
Hmm.
Thanks so much, Kristen, for joining me and sharing all that wisdom.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.